More rain to come this week. Just what is going on in the stratosphere and how warm has February been? How wet has February been? Also, standing waves and rain bunching. There is so much going on in this week's Met Office Deep Dive. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you for being there. Thank you for watching. Do hit the like button and do us a favour. My name's Alex Deakin. Welcome along. I am talking to you from Met Office headquarters in Exeter in Devon. If you've not seen a Met Office Deep Dive before, we talk about the relevant weather situations and anything that takes our fancy in the world of meteorology over the next 20 to 30 minutes or so. Please share the love. If you know another Met head who might like a Met Office Deep Dive, then let them know about it and share this video. As I said, please do hit like and please also comment. Now later on, after I've recorded this, I'm going to be in the comments probably from about 4:30 till about 5 o'clock. So if you're watching there, if you've watched it then, got some questions, got some comments, join me in the comments section. But if you're watching this later on, don't worry, please keep your comments coming. We will go through them. We do read them all and try and reply to them. Comments about anything. If you've got any suggestions for future deep dives, anything like that, please do put them in the comments section. Right, as I said, a lot to get through. We'll start with the bigger picture, start with a satellite image over the last 5 days, look at the swirls of cloud, low pressure systems moving up between the UK and Greenland, and all of our weather as a result has been coming up from the southwest. When the air is coming up from the southwest, it's travelling over the Atlantic, big mass of water, and it's also coming up from a warmer, more tropical direction. That is why it has been so mild and pretty wet over recent times. In fact, almost for the entirety of February, you might say. And, well, we'll see a little bit of a change later this week, but not a significant change. Why are we stuck in this weather pattern? Well, as you might imagine, if you've watched the deep dives before, it's kind of to do with the jet stream and the position of the jet stream. It's at the moment a little more south shifted than usual. If we play through the sequence, it kind of stays in that way. The jet stream, that fast moving river of air high up in the atmosphere that dictates our weather patterns, it's just pushing low pressure systems just to the north of the UK, and the weather fronts are bringing us the rain. Later this week, it becomes even more south shifted. It's just dipping down to the south through Wednesday, and particularly, let's fast forward it a little bit, by the time we get into Thursday. So now the jet's really dipping down here. We've got this trough then sitting over the UK. There's dip in the jet stream, and that's a breeding ground for more areas of low pressure to come in. Plenty of isobars on the chart. So yes, through the rest of this week, further spells of wet and windy weather are definitely on the cards. Let's take a look at the rainfall then, because actually for many of us Monday was a dry day, and it's still dry out there on Tuesday across a good chunk of central and eastern England. We do have this weather front bringing some rain that's pushing further south, and that will continue, but it's kind of fizzling out as it does so. That first band of rain, it then weakens, but then look at this, more rain coming in through Wednesday. It's going to be a very wet night across much of the west, Tuesday night into Wednesday night. Plenty more rain to come. Look at those brighter colours over the hills in particular. More on that in a moment. And then once that's out of the way, we get this nasty looking line of showers coming in. Let's play through this, because this is quite a nasty looking line. Quite a narrow line, but just look how those brighter colours there. You can see that line almost as it crosses the Midlands towards eastern England. Some uncertainty about the timing and exactly how that progresses, but this could be, it's called a squall line. It's quite a, the brighter colour. Let's just rewind it a little bit. See this really narrow line in there. That's signal the winds are changing direction rapidly across this weather front, and this strong wind veer generates really strong gusts of wind and a really short burst of very heavy rain as that moves through. So watch out for that as we go through, particularly the first part of Thursday, especially over central and eastern parts of England. There is a bit of uncertainty about how that progresses, but it will bring us, say, a spell of pretty lively rain once it's crossed through. Once that's out of the way, remember, the jet stream's dipping to the south now, so we're in the colder air. We're properly on the cold side of the jet. So it has been a very warm February so far. Again, more on that in a moment. But as that weather front moves through, it will be introducing cooler air. I'm going to put the freezing level on now. The freezing level is how high up you have to go through the atmosphere, how high up in the sky you have to get before you get to 0 Celsius. And at the moment, it's pretty mild across the UK. You can just make out Scotland there. There's Northern Ireland, East Anglia there. We're in this dark green zone, which is the freezing level is at least 1,400 meters up. You've got to go 1.4 kilometers up through the sky before you get to 0 Celsius. But that will change as we go through the next few days. Pulses of colder air try and push in across Scotland, and then as that active front swings across the country during Thursday, notice not only are you going to see quite a strong wind veer, but you're also going to see quite a drop in temperatures, and the freezing level behind that will suddenly start to drop, so that by the time we get to the end of Thursday, most of the UK are in this bluer zone, so the freezing level is 400 to 600 metres, and across Scotland and even Northern Ireland, the freezing levels drop to only 200 metres. So you have to go 200 metres up before you get to 0 Celsius, which means as the showers come in across northern Scotland, we will start to see some snow returning at least to some of the higher routes here during the course of Thursday. Nothing unusual about that. It's February, snow in Scotland, but because it has been so mild, well, it's a little bit of a change from the norm. And even across parts of North Wales and northern England, on the tops of the hills, we could see a little bit of winteriness in the showers that come in on Friday. So turning a little colder, emphasis on the temperatures later this week, just going to be back closer to average, but because it has been so mild, you probably will notice the difference. Let's go back to the rainfall though, because as I said, plenty going on with this. As the rain comes in tonight again, especially in the west, we do have Met Office warning in place for this. There's the yellow warning for tonight and into tomorrow morning. It's just gone out the warning area, out the warning time, because it's from midnight until 12. So in this zone, we could easily see 15-25 millimetres of rain quite widely, and more than double that on some of the hills. Now that is not a huge amount of rainfall for this part of the world to fall in 24 hours though. The key thing is it has been so wet, so that is likely to cause some further flooding issues over parts of Wales, South Wales, and extending up into the mountains of North Wales and also across the southwest of England. So we do have that Met Office yellow warning in place for tonight and tomorrow morning, Tuesday night into Wednesday morning, for that heavy rain, because as I said, it could cause certainly some local flooding, and there'll be a lot of spray and surface water on the roads. So the roads like the M5 in particular, the M4 in South Wales, not great for that morning commute on Wednesday morning. Now, let's go back to the rain, because I want to show you something really quite cool here with the rainfall and the way that it's going to fall. Notice the wind's coming in from the southwest. This band of rain is kind of fizzling out as we go through this afternoon into this evening. But this next pulse of rain as it comes in, really quite interesting. The heavier rain, let's zoom right in on that actually. The heavier rain, the brighter colours, the oranges, the yellows and the reds. And notice there's a kind of stripy pattern down here. So this is, you can make Plymouth out there, there's Cardiff, this is Devon Cornwall. So the air's coming up, hitting Dartmoor. You'll notice here, so you get some heavier rain over the hills, you'd expect that. But then there's almost like a double stripe. Another zone of heavier rain here and another one of heavier rain. And that is because we're seeing the hills, the moors, generating a bit of a wave going on. So the air is rising, it's falling, it's rising and it's falling. And as it's rising, it's cooling, it's condensing and it's dropping more rain. So you get this kind of striped pattern, not just on here, but also I can show you in another model out. This is the accumulation of rainfall. And again, you can just about make out the southwest here, but it's also happening further north across northern England. These kind of lines of rain where the air is going up and coming down. You get the bouncing effect over the hills. It's going to kind of show that in a bit of a drawing. So you've got the hill here, and you've got the air rising and going up over the hills. Let's do that as an arrow. So the air goes up over the mountain and it comes back down the other side, but it doesn't stop there. It then goes up again and it forms a wave. So every time you've got the air going up, it's cooling, it's condensing and it's falling as rain. So you get more rainfall on this side, then you get a drier slot because the air is descending, and then you get more rain again as the air starts to go back up again. So you get this standing wave pattern. That's reasonably common, happens pretty frequently in setups like this, where you have the winds kind of pushing in a very uniform direction over the mountains. You get heavy rain on this side of the mountains, you get a drier slot on the lee side of the mountains, and then you get another pulse of rain as the air starts to bounce up once again. That's a standing wave. But now we're going to go, this is why it's called the deep dive. We're going to go really deep now into a brand new paper that my colleague Nick Silkston put me onto this morning. Now, Nick is deputy chief here at the Met Office. Very, very clever guy, always looking for trends, always looking for interesting meteorological tidbits. And he spotted that this pattern set up this morning is highly likely to be being enhanced, the stripy nature of the rain, not just by that standing wave, but also by something else. And this something else has been highlighted by a former colleague of ours, Eddie Carroll, in this brand new paper that you can see in Statosphere. Eddie Carroll used to be a chief meteorologist here at the Met Office, not anymore, but a very, very clever guy, and he's still heavily involved in meteorology. And he has been looking at the way standing waves impacted the rainfall that fell over the Lake District in December 2015. A lot of heavy rain fell. There was serious flooding. And I'm going to show you this diagram now. This is from that paper because this is really, really interesting. Blew my mind when I saw this morning. Now, okay, bear with me because it's a pretty complicated diagram. So you go back to, if you really want to study it, that's the title of the paper. So you can go and find it for yourself online. But this diagram particularly struck with me today. Now, this is a cross-section across the Lake District. These are the hills and the mountains. This is in kilometres along the bottom. It's a cross-section of the atmosphere going up through the atmosphere here, okay? Now, the darker shading, the dark greys and the blacks, that is where the air is rising. So that's speed of the air in meters per second. So the darker shade is where the air is rising. And as you expect that, I should have said the wind is blowing this way. The general wind direction is from left to right. In this case, it was a westerly, so west to east. So the air is hitting the mountains and it's rising. And that's what the dark greys and the black is suggesting here. Then as it's coming down the other side, the air is descending. It's descending where it's white and the pale grey, and then it's rising again because you've got more hills and mountains here. Now, the key thing here is this purple line, which is the freezing level, or in this case, more relevant to think of it as the melting level. So as snow is falling, it's hitting this line, which is around 0 Celsius, and it's turning back to rain. And the line here, notice the freezing level in this cross-section actually drops here because the air is rising. The rising air is also cooling as well as it's condensing, which is meaning that the freezing level drops. So as you're going up the hill, actually, the freezing level will start to drop. And then as you go down the hill with the air descending, the freezing level starts to rise once more. So this is the line at which snow turns to rain. And that's dictated by these dotted lines, which you can just about make out here. So anything above this purple line is snow. Anything below it is rain. Now here's the crucial thing. Snow falls slower than rainfall. You'll have noticed that if you've ever seen any snow. There haven't been a lot of it around this winter, but you will notice that snow, because it's bigger, it's a larger mass, it falls slower than rain. So the trajectory of snow in these dotted lines here along the path, and as you get to the air here, it's actually starting to rise. So what you see is the snow coming down, hits the melting level, and it rains. And the rain comes down at a steeper angle because it's heavier, it falls faster. But what happens, because you've got this dip in the freezing level, you get this kind of zone here where the snow isn't melting, it's just continuing to travel on its way until it intersects here with that rising freezing level again. So you get a more concentrated area where the snow turns into rain, and as a result down here you get an enhancement of the rain. So you get that enhancement of the rain anyway because the air is going up, but you get a double enhancement. You get that secondary boost because of the way it interacts. You get a shadow where there isn't as much precipitation. And also you get this enhancement, this secondary enhancement, rainfall bunching that's called, and that's in a brand new paper, I say, by Eddie Carroll. Go and check it out if you want to. It's really, really fascinating. Blew my mind this morning. So special thanks to Nick from the guidance unit upstairs for pointing that out to me. We'll try and maybe put a link to it in the chat as well if we can. And that's kind of shown here, but this is the real-time data for what's going on with the rainfall tonight and tomorrow morning across the southwest. So we've got Devon and Cornwall here. The black lines are the freezing level, and the coloured zones are where the air is descending. It's that vertical velocity, but now we're looking down. Instead of a cross section, we're looking down at Devon and Cornwall, and you can see where they're corresponding with the descending air and the gradient of the freezing level is changing. You get those 2 or 3 different zones there across South Devon in particular, which should, fingers crossed for me and my cycle to work in the morning, mean that in Exeter, where I am, there will be a bit of a rain shadow, and hopefully the rain won't be as heavy here as it will be in other parts as shown here. So we're in this little zone here in Exeter. So hopefully there'll be a bit of a rain shadow here, whereas the rain will be pretty heavy across South Devon down towards Plymouth, and again in this next zone somewhere across Dorset and Somerset. So we're really interested to see if that happens, and again you can see it, similar patterns a bit further north across the UK as well. So yeah, fascinating meteorology that'll be happening on Wednesday morning across the UK. Wow, that was good, wasn't it? Right, where are we talking about next? Let's go and look at the longer term and the longer range forecast. Let's get rid of the jet stream because, well, now let's put the jet stream back on actually, because what we're going to see, we see this dip in the jet stream towards Friday. We're in the colder air, lots of showers around. What happens at the weekend will be determined by what happens out here. Complex interactions between a couple of areas of low pressure, and the jets, it's a bit all over the place. It's kind of splitting, bifurcating here, and that adds to complications with this area of low pressure as we see over the next few days how that then topples around and then drives back down and comes towards the UK as we head towards Saturday and Sunday. That complex interaction with the jet splitting, and the models aren't in complete agreement with where this low pressure will go as we head into Sunday. And it could be, depending on how it interacts with the jet stream, it could get picked up and spun up into quite a nasty looking area of low pressure. Some models have been doing that for Sunday, so it is something that we need to watch. But at the moment there is quite a lot of uncertainty. And this is the spread. These are the postage stamps, the model output when we run them many, many times from what we call an ensemble forecast. So instead of just looking at one computer model, you run it many, many times and you get lots of different solutions from which you can work out a kind of probability of or a chance of what certain things are going to happen. Now, if you look at these top ones, you probably can't see them very well. So I can go full screen maybe on this. You can see those top ones there, all pretty much in agreement. There'll be some heavy, sorry, I should have said, these are all showing where it's going to rain on Sunday. And you can see that heavy rain in agreement there across those top 4. But then if you look at number 13, for example, that's in agreement with a lot of heavy rain. But you look at number 23 or number 32, they both have pretty much dry conditions across the south. So there is quite a lot of a range of spread because of that complex interaction with the jet stream, how that low pressure will manifest itself. Nothing too unusual about that. Again, we're talking 5 days ahead. You wouldn't expect a detailed forecast at this stage for Sunday, but do keep up to date with the forecast for Sunday, particularly if you live in the south, because there could be some more wet and windy weather on the way. Annie is doing the 10-day trend. She will have more on that tomorrow, no doubt. Right. Where should we go next? Let's have a quick look at February so far, because as we've been discussing, it has been wet and very, very wet, but also very, very mild. And there is more rain to come, and there is a dip in the temperatures to come, but only closer to average. But this graph, again, we've shown these before on the deep dive, is showing the cumulative temperature throughout February. So each day we mark on the average mean temperature, and you can plot that across the month and compare it to the average and compare it to previous records. And I'm showing this one because notice the last couple of days we just jumped right up to that red line, which is the highest we have recorded. So getting close to, well, it is close to record-breaking values for the mean temperature across February so far. Still plenty of time to go, extra day this year as well, so still 10 days to go, so that can change. But at the moment we are running close to record-breaking values for February. This is with the data up to the 19th, so up to yesterday. Temperature distribution across, I don't want to show that one. It was a bit of a tease, wasn't it, for some sudden stratospheric warming action. What I wanted to show here was this temperature map. So quite a range across the country, but notice northern Scotland in the white there at the top. That's the only area where temperatures are close to average so far. The rest of the UK in the pinks and the reds. And that dark red there, I know that dark red offends some people, but it is extreme, this. And we have dark blue for when it's cold extreme, but it isn't cold, it's been very warm. So that's why we have the dark red colours there covering eastern and central England, indicating that temperatures are running 3.5 degrees above average in these at least. And as we saw earlier, that mean temperature is even higher than that. Similar maps for where we've seen the heaviest rainfall as well, and in particular that blue, that darker blue zone, that is where we've had 200% of the average February rainfall. So we've had twice the monthly average already, and again that is with data up to yesterday, so still 10 days to go up to the 29th. That zone there, Lincolnshire down towards Cambridgeshire, twice the monthly average rainfall, and anywhere that's blue has already had 125% of the February rainfall. You'd expect it to be around 66%, so you'd expect it to be in this brown, this pale brown colour at this stage, because there is still 10 days to go. So that would be bang on average, but all the rest of the UK are already above the average, and many places have already had their month's worth of rainfall. As I said, some parts have already had twice their monthly rainfall average. So it has been very mild. It's also been pretty wet. Okay, let's change tack now and take a look at what's going on in the stratosphere, or rather has been going on in the stratosphere, because it has been a little bit bonkers. Don't take my word for that though, because Dr. Simon Lee on Twitter also thinks so. Simon Lee is a world-leading expert in the polar vortex and sudden stratospheric warming. You should follow him on X, as it now is, regularly posting about what's going on high up in the stratosphere. Really interesting guy, really fascinating posts on there. So follow him on Twitter, on X. That was his post from a couple of days ago. This winter's Arctic stratospheric polar vortex is, to be honest, a bit bananas. So there you go. From the experts, it's a bonkers year for the polar vortex. What has been going on? If you watched last week's with Annie, you'll know that we were expecting the winds to reverse in the polar vortex. Now, this is all tied in with sudden stratospheric warming, or SSW. Now, sudden stratospheric warming is where the air high up in the stratosphere above the North Pole suddenly jumps up in temperature. Now, that's useful in some ways because it's indicative of what's going on with the polar vortex, but we're really interested in what's going on, more to do with the polar vortex than actually the temperature. The fact that the temperature suddenly jumps up is just an indication that the polar vortex is weakening or is being displaced. What's the polar vortex? Well, that is the winds kind of like form a donut, strong winds around the North Pole. Happens every winter due to what's going on high up in the atmosphere. You set up these strong winds that spin around the North Pole throughout the winter. What can happen is that can get displaced, dislodged, just messed around with. And when that happens, you see a sudden spike in temperatures. But more importantly, when the polar vortex gets messed around with or changes shape or gets a little bit out of shape, that can, in some cases, lead to effects lower down towards the atmosphere and have impacts across the UK. There is a link between when sudden stratospheric warming happens and an increased chance of seeing blocking weather patterns, which is an increasing chance of seeing easterly winds, which is why people get excited about it, because it can lead to snowier conditions. But it doesn't always, as has been the case this year. And the polar vortex in particular, as with Simon Lee said earlier, has been particularly crazy this year. And it's showing no signs of becoming even less bonkers, because we've seen this graph. This is what Annie showed a version of this last week that was suggesting that the winds around the polar vortex would reverse temporarily. They did, but really, really briefly. And now this blue line is showing that they are recovering. So the polar vortex is getting back up to speed. And in the next week or so, it's expected to get back up to here and close to the average. Now, this red line is the average wind speed of the polar vortex as we go through March and towards April. Notice it's dropping off, because that's what happens. As you go through to spring, the polar vortex dies, if you like. The tilt of the Earth means it all warms up and you don't get that polar vortex anymore. It sets up every autumn and it goes away every spring. And that's the mean line, that's the average line of those winds, showing you that it's dipping off. But what's happening here is quite interesting with this year's polar vortex. It is now picking up speed again, but it is expected to dip back down again and really start to weaken, or at least wobble significantly. And it never looks like recovering after that. So there is a decent chance that this could be the end of the polar vortex this season. Even with it dropping back down though, cold fanatics, snowmantics, don't get too excited, because even if it does drop down like this, it'll be a couple of weeks before we see any effects, because it's all got to ripple down from the stratosphere. Remember, this is going on high up in the stratosphere. It all has to come down through the atmosphere, and that takes a couple of weeks. And by which stage we will be into the middle or latter part of March. It's going to be very, very hard for us to get anything colder, significantly cold, with Arctic air or anything like that, or cold conditions, cold Arctic air coming back across the UK. So don't get too excited, but what this does show is that we've seen a few of these episodes with the polar vortex weakening a few times through the winter, and this could be an early death of the polar vortex, happening potentially in the early part of March, when normally the polar vortex doesn't die until the middle of April. You want more on that? As I say, go and follow Simon Lee on Twitter/X, and there's also a video about what the polar vortex is and sudden stratospheric warming on our other YouTube channel, Learn About Weather. We will put a link to that in the chat as well, no doubt. Did I want to say anything else? I'm not sure I did. I think that's pretty much it for this week. Thank you so much for being there. Thank you for watching. Got any questions, got any comments? I will be in the chat, as I say, from about 4:30 to 5 o'clock. But even if you're watching later than that, please do keep your comments coming, and I'll dip in and out over the next few days and try and answer some of those comments. We would love your feedback. I would really love you to hit the like button. That does us a big, big favor. It spreads the word, and it means we can keep doing more and more of these. Big shout out again to my former colleague, former chief Eddie Carroll, so you can go and check out that paper once more, and also to Nick Silkston, deputy chief upstairs. We'll have to bring him in one day for a chat. We've talked about him and Dan Harris and the other deputy chiefs who really do help us out with these deep dives. Big shout out to Simon, who's next door and doing all the camera work as well. I know that you just see me and Aidan and Annie and Alex, but there's a bit of a team of us here in the content team that have to put these things together, and it doesn't just come together miraculously. It takes a bit of work from the whole team, the whole content team. So big shout out to Simon Hammond, who is running things next door right now. But that's it from me for this week. Join Annie tomorrow on the 10-day trend. Goodbye.